From Boca Raton, Florida, Rabbis Efrem Goldberg, Philip Moskowitz, and Josh Broide are taking you behind the Bima. The BRS rabbis schmooze about contemporary issues and talk to special guests who give a behind-the-scenes look at how they got to where they are and what keeps them going. Welcome to Behind the Bima.
Good evening. It is Wednesday night, 9 o'clock. I am Rabbi Efrem Goldberg, joined by my dear friends, Rabbi Philip Moskowitz and Rabbi Josh Broide, and we are here to take you
behind the Bima.
We're here to take you behind the Bima. Welcome back. We're so grateful you're with us, and we don't take it for granted in the least. Thank you for another Wednesday night. I want to thank our generous sponsors, Rina Ben Smian, in memory of her grandfather, Morton Kaufman. Mort was an amazing man, a great business mind, a father, a grandfather, and his family should have wonderful memories and continue to learn from him. He was very special. And thank you to Rena, a young lady, for sponsoring tonight in her grandfather's memory.
That might be our youngest sponsor yet.
I think Rena is our youngest sponsor yet. So Rena, thank you for that. Deeply appreciated. And sponsorship yet again by Beeper MD. Beeper MD is an amazing, led by a member of our community, to be able to take tests at home, free at-home PCR tests, and $30 rapid antigen tests. Schools, business, nonprofits throughout South Florida have been using Beeper MD. So check it out. Check out Beeper MD's website. Check out their social media handles and take advantage of those opportunities. Rabbis, gentlemen, how are you? Have you recovered yet from Purim?
Covered yet? I'm taking Purim with me. Purim was amazing. Thank God. A little different this year on a Friday. A little rushed going into Shabbos. I'm not going to lie. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I wrote
How did you manage the timing? How did you manage the pacing?
Well, Baruch Hashem, I have a wonderful Eishes Chayil who helped me along with the pacing and reminded me about Shabbos. But it was nice. I wrote about in my article this week how nice it was for the first time in really a long time to just laugh and to be with people and to have a good time. It was really, really nice. It was special. And it was, it was Purim. So it's always inspirational. How about you guys?
I loved it. I loved it. It was really, really, really just nice to finally see a little bit of life. Like you haven't seen a lot of life on the circle, and you had that big parade, and you see everyone outside, and it's nice. Families are excited to be outside and being able to celebrate another Jewish holiday.
Now, hold on. You referenced the parade. I have to give our listeners a little bit of background to this. For maybe the first 9 years I was in Boca, every year it was a running joke. Rabbi Goldberg wanted to do a Purim parade. And every year in our staff meetings, we would actually laugh right in his face. And last year, your dream came true and you had your Purim parade. And this year was the second year. Tell us a little about the Boca Purim parade, Rabbi Goldberg.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's as close as a Bostoner comes to saying you were right. So we did have an amazing second annual Purim parade. The inspiration for the Purim parade came from Rabbi Freifeld Zatzal of Shar Yashuv, the founder of Shar Yashuv, because I read an article a few years ago about how throughout Far Rockaway, the 5 towns, Rabbi Freifeld led a parade, and the idea was to bring Purim to the streets, to the masses. That at that time, Far Rockaway, the 5 towns, were overwhelmingly non-observant Jews who probably didn't even have on their calendar necessarily know it was Purim. So by bringing this festive, musical, fun parade to the streets, you were bringing the Purim joy to the masses, and that was the idea. We have the weather, we have the layout, Montoya Circle, the perfect circle, start at the shul. We have the phenomenon. Jason Zangri, a great volunteer of the Boca Raton Synagogue, has a golf cart company and rents golf carts on Purim. And so we did it last year. We did it again this year. We had marshals last year. This year, Commissioner Weinroth and Pam Weinroth were the honorary marshals of our Purim parade, grand marshals of the Purim parade. And it was fantastic. Lots and lots of golf carts, bicycles, scooters, cars, all lined up. Some people decorated, music blasted, police and sheriff escort as we made our way around the circle. Poor Ben Shapiro was delivering Shalach Manos and got stuck in the parade, Nebuch, but he probably wrote like 3 books while he was sitting in the car and stuck. He banged out a few books, a few articles, and started a new company. But it was a fantastic success, and we're looking forward to the 3rd annual Purim parade in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, we hope.
Amazing.
You don't see a lot of golf carts in Yerushalayim.
You don't see a lot of golf carts yet.
No.
That's true.
Not yet.
That's true.
I will say one of the nicest parts, and you mentioned it, was, you mentioned the police and sheriff escort, but there was an enormous presence here, and they were enjoying it. They were having fun. They were waving. They were getting into it. And so it's nice to be able to include them in the Purim festivities as well.
It was. And with Purim behind us, now we're looking forward to Pesach. And like rabbis everywhere, we are always, every holiday that comes with enormous pressure and responsibility to try to navigate, lead the community, how to observe the holiday in a way that's safe. And many, many, many members of our community have been vaccinated, certainly those over 65. Now in the state of Florida, we know we have listeners in our global community around the globe, but in the state of Florida, they've now invited, I believe, teachers, people with other conditions, and the vaccination list is growing. And the CDC, please God, is apparently coming out saying that those who are vaccinated can be indoors together without a mask. So like rabbis everywhere, we're debating, what does that mean for us? Do we start a vaccinated no mask minyan? We're going to try to create a buddy system. Last year, people were alone, unimaginably, unthinkably. They were alone, like people by themselves for the Seder and on Pesach. And this year, nobody should have to be alone. We can partner and buddy and ensure that even those who can't travel or be with family can nevertheless have a full Pesach Passover experience. So we're starting to think about that, as people are everywhere.
Yeah, and one of the things, as you mentioned, that's a little tricky. It's just, you got to balance everyone's sensitivities. Everyone's in a different place, and some people feel more comfortable, and some people feel less comfortable. So really is going to be like a shidduch service, where we're going to do an intake and figure out what people are comfortable with, those who are in need of meals, and we're going to have volunteers who are willing to offer their homes as destinations, and we're going to match people up to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the protocols in place and that everyone feels safe and secure. But as you said, most importantly, that chas v'shalom this year, people should feel alone on Pesach. It would be a great travesty.
Exactly. We got a great show. We got a lot more to talk about. We'll come back to this, and we have some Aguna conversation about what community's responsibilities are, timing, and even here in our own backyard. We'll get to that, but first we're going to welcome momentarily one of my favorite authors. I've read several, if not all of his books. I love his articles, and I'll tell you why I love A.J. Jacobs. The reason I love him is because he's insightful. Every book you learn something. It's thought-provoking. It challenges you to look at a different angle, think about it differently. But at the same time, I love, we share this in common. By we here, I mean Rabbi Moskowitz, Rabbi Broide is still learning that reading is fundamental. But Rabbi Moskowitz and I love reading productivity. Right? We like reading productivity books, and we like reading efficiency books, and we like reading the kind of books that challenge our mind. But AJ's style is to be entertaining. It's witty, it's smart, it's insightful, it's challenging. He immerses himself in his experiences. So I always walk away having learned something and having laughed. He's the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers. He's written The Know-It-All, where he spent, I think, 18 months reading the entire encyclopedia from A to Z, trying to become the smartest person alive. Drop Dead Healthy. These are not in this order, so I don't know who wrote this bio. But Drop Dead Healthy, where he was experimenting with different things and different aspects of living healthy. I read that one. I was healthy for like 20 minutes after reading it. The Year of Living Biblically, which we'll talk a lot about tonight, where he read our Bible literally, tried to take it literally. Literally is one of the favorite words of the show behind the Bima. He literally read the Bible literally and tried to live it. And other books. He's most recently written a book about gratitude. Thanks 1,000, traveling the globe to personally thank everyone involved in what it takes to get a morning cup of coffee, from the barista to the farmer, the logo designer, the truck driver, everybody else.
Did he actually read the entire encyclopedia?
He read the entire encyclopedia.
He did?
Broide
I actually tried doing that also.
Not read the book. I read the Know-It-All.
I was I was much younger, and I said, I don't
Rabbi Broide, where'd you stop at A or B or?
No, I don't think I made it to the second page of A. But it was something which I thought, it was boring. I got to the first page and I was like, this is not exciting. So
he has given 4 TED Talks, totaling the listeners of his 4 TED Talks, more than 7 million people. He's a frequent contributor to NPR. He's written the New York Times. He's an editor of Esquire Magazine. The list goes on and on and on. But really, if you read his things, not all of it language does Behind the Bima endorse, not all of the language and themes, but mostly, really, you will be challenged, you will be entertained, and you will get a lot out of it. It's always a lot of fun to be able to read them. One of my favorite articles of his, hopefully we'll get into, is his article about radical honesty, which I sent Rabbi Broide today. He read an article in Esquire.
And I was completely radically honest. The first thing I wrote back to you was, it's a very long article. Can you just summarize it for me?
That was radically honest. When I first read that article many years ago, I thought about trying to practice it for a little bit, but that is a bad idea. So there's a movement called Radical Honesty. We'll talk about it with him momentarily. And he tried to live that movement. Another great article he wrote about outsourcing life. He spent 1 month where he outsourced his life to somebody overseas using technology, where overseas somebody, I forgot what country it was, a young woman read the books to his kids to put them to bed. He even had them fight with his wife on his behalf. He outsourced every aspect of his life. Could you imagine we could send somebody to shul to pray in the morning for us, outsource every part of our life? Just each one of these is fantastic. It's thoughtful, it's insightful, it's fun, and it's really a great pleasure to be able to welcome him to our program.
Next week, you're going to see in Rabbi Moskowitz's place. You're going to see some guy from India.
Exactly. On the show, he's going to outsource Buying the Bima. AJ, welcome to Buying the Bima. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. I didn't outsource my interview. I'm here. I am here in person.
We appreciate that.
I'm honored to be here. I'm outnumbered by rabbis, but I'm honored. Can I give a quick shout out to one of your listeners, Kyla Krauser at Katz Yeshiva in Florida, who's listening and with her class. Hello, shalom.
Wow.
Fantastic.
All that other Jewish words.
Big shout out. Wow.
That is a big shout out. AJ, thank you for being with us. I want our listeners to know, like I told you, I've been a fan of AJ, and I found him on Twitter, and I direct messaged him, thinking, like several other people who I've tried, he would never get back to me. He's, a powerful, prominent author, and he wrote me back and agreed to come on the show, and for that, we really, really appreciate it. So, AJ, I'll tell you how I want to begin. You've said on many occasions, and you've written, that while you're Jewish, you did not grow up with a strong Jewish background, and you said you're Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian.
Yes, I stand by that. I stand by that. So they are, yeah. So it's not like when you go to Olive Garden, you're not getting you're not going to Venice or Florence. You're getting a watered down version.
Right. So what I found fascinating though is in your introduction to Year of Living Biblically, you mention your Orthodox aunt. That you have an aunt who is an Orthodox observant Jew. So obviously you have some exposure to Orthodox or observant life. And one of the things I find fascinating is that a lot of what you've immersed yourself in experientially, experimentally, and written about really overlap with Jewish values. So whether it's the concept of learning and study and trying to be smart and memorize the encyclopedia, whether it's your most recent about gratitude, whether it's the book about how we're all related and the value of family, whether it's biblical. So you make fun of yourself that you're Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian, but your books really, in my case, enhanced my religious experience, caused me to think religiously and in my relationship with God, with family, and with these character traits. And so there's a lot of overlap there. And I'm wondering from you, is that coincidental, or do you think that there is some meaning?
I'm delighted to hear it, and I've been told that, and I see it too. I see it, I grew up a cultural Jew, so I do have it soaked into me. I'm also always learning, because I wrote this book on gratitude. And the premise, I think you might have mentioned, I went around the world and thanked 1,000 people who had anything to do with my morning cup of coffee. So I thanked the barista, but I flew to South America and thanked the farmer. I thanked the logo designer, the truck, the guy who drove the truck, just the guy who made the traffic lights for the truck, anything. Wow. Just to show how interconnected we all are, how much we take for granted. And it was interesting because when I started that project, I did not think of gratitude as a very Jewish value, because my cultural Judaism, the emotions that I most thought of, were like kvetching. That was like, that's a Jewish emotion.
Guilt, complaining.
Guilt,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
But just in researching and talking to wise rabbis like you, I was enlightened that it is a tremendously Jewish emotion. Not only that, like very name Judaism comes from Judah, the word which comes from being grateful. So, and I'm told that the first prayer that Orthodox Jews say every morning is a prayer of thanksgiving. So, it was interesting. I mean, that I didn't plan, but it became clear as it is a very Jewish notion.
Exactly. And, I heard you in one of your videos and in the book, you talk about the fact that you've incorporated it into your daily routine because gratitude is something that we struggle to be mindful of. But you'll wake up and say, thank you that the electricity is working. Thank you that I have breakfast. And that is exactly the Jewish concept. We make a blessing before and after everything we eat, which is an exercise in being mindful to say thank you. We wake up, the first words on our lips are, I'm grateful to be alive. So it is a core Jewish value.
I love that. And one rabbi told me, and you can tell me if it's wrong, is that there is a prayer. There are dozens of prayers of Thanksgiving, and that there is actually a prayer of Thanksgiving for the concept of gratitude, which I think is very cool and meta. It's like I'm grateful for gratitude.
Grateful that I can be grateful. That's it.
There you go. So I love that.
How has being grateful changed your life? First of all, would your wife and kids say that you've kept up? I'm asking you a personal question. But
it's always, it's a struggle. I do think
parallel in our world. Parallel in our world. I was just going to say the parallel in our world is that our wives accuse us that we live our lives in order to be able to give sermons. So that all of our experiences or anything that we do is just so we have material. Like I planted a garden during Corona, and my wife and kids make fun of me. You don't really care about the garden. You just got your sermon out of it. So do your wife and kids basically say you got your book and your article out of it, but then it disappears?
Well, that is funny. Yeah, everything is material. That is fun. But some of it does sink in, and I'm sure you ate the vegetables. You enjoyed the vegetables, so it wasn't just for a sermon. And the same with my books. It really did change my life, and I didn't give it up. It's still a struggle because I talk in the book about we all have our two sides. We've got our Larry David side and our Mr. Rogers side. The pessimistic side and sort of the optimistic, hopeful side and grateful side. So I still have a very strong Larry David side. And but it's too strong. You want some Larry David in you, but you don't want too much because it's fun to watch his show. I do enjoy watching, but I don't want to be in his mind. That's not a fun place to be. So so it is a struggle, and it is a discipline that I practice every day. As you know, I'm not an observant Jew, Orthodox Jew anyway, but I do say thanks. I make it a part of my day. I say thanks. When I go to sleep, I go through the alphabet and say thanks for everything. Every letter gets its own thanks. A, I'm thankful for the apple pancakes my son made. B, I'm delighted to be on Behind the Bima.
I think we just lost him.
We lost a rabbi.
He'll come back. First of all, I love that trick or that little tool to go through the alphabet and to basically find something that you're grateful for each letter. I'm curious where you get your ideas from. Obviously as people who are also generating content fairly regularly. So, we compare it to the average person goes through the world with glasses on, but a rabbi goes through in like 3D color because everything they're looking at has to be like, can I use this for a sermon? Can I use that for a sermon? What's your process? Walk us through your creative process of like, how do you come up with the ideas? Like every time I read one of your books, I'm like, why not think of that? It's so obvious, but you think of it and you make it happen and you're so witty about it and so insightful about it. Where do your ideas come from and how do you bring that to fruition?
Well, first of all, welcome back, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Welcome to Behind the Bima.
When are you going to do your article or book on like the perils of technology and the
it's weird.
Technology?
20 years ago, I thought about doing a book where I would only communicate by electronics just to see what it was like. And I never ended up doing it, partly because my wife was like, you're not coming to our niece's bat mitzvah, on Skype. We didn't have Zoom then, it was Skype. But now, I don't need to do it because we're all living it.
Right.
But anyway, the question, Rabbi
Moskowitz,
Rabbi Moskowitz had asked about where I come up with my ideas. And I love what you said. I love that always having, always being on the lookout. It's a mindset. So going through life, looking for ideas, not just being a passive hoping that the muse strikes you. But always, one friend of mine, a Jewish writer, actually described it as having almost like a second head next to your head, like on the shoulder, just like while you're living your life, you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what. But a lot of it is also just my family. My father was the one who started to read the encyclopedia when I was a kid, because, as you mentioned, he's not he's not an Orthodox or observant Jew, but he is a person of the book. He's a man of the book. He loves the Jewish value of reading and learning. And he didn't make it. He made it a little farther than you. He made it to the B's, like around Bolivia, or was it Rabbi Broide? Brody? Yeah. So, but I thought, what if I finished what he began and removed that dark stain from our family history? So I got that from him. My son was the one who gave me the idea for the gratitude book. My wife gave me the idea for the book about health, because she basically said, when I got sick, I was not a healthy person. I ate what I wanted and I never exercised. And she's like, I don't want to be a widow when I'm 42 years old. You better get in shape. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to do it, let's just do it. Let's just go for it and try every single piece of medical and health advice I can find and see what works and see what doesn't.
Wow.
So let me ask you, if I could jump back in, and I don't know if you spoke about this while technology made me disappear. But again, it's a little personal question, so stop me if I'm pushing. But your whole MO and the themes of your books are to immerse yourself in an area and then to see what you find, to live it, and not just to postulate or speculate about it. So I'm wondering whether you've tried that with your Judaism. Now, you could argue in the Year of Living Biblically, that's exactly what that was, that you took the Bible and the Old Testament. However, there's a companion to it called the Oral Torah. So the Rabbinic Judaism and the way we live life, which is obviously the conclusion of your book, or is the conclusion, even though, and you could talk about what it was like to stone somebody, and obviously you grew your hair, your beard, no razor touched your face, and all those things which were amazing and hilarious. But have you ever immersed yourself, or why not, or would you consider immersing yourself in your Judaism most fully, to really study, to really experience the full gamut of Rabbinic Judaism? I don't know your aunt, but to live, let's say, like your aunt, an observant Jewish life, to really immerse in that, to evaluate it from the inside. Because at the end of the Year Living Biblically, you write that, do you believe in traditional biblical God? Not in the sense that ancient Israelites believed in him. You can never make the full leap to accepting a God who rolls up his sleeves and fiddles with our lives. I'm still agnostic, but a reverent agnostic. And then you talk about the things that you hope to continue to keep, like resting on the Sabbath, wearing more white clothing, offering the prayers of thanksgiving, which I don't know if you knew then you were going to write that book. So, I guess my question is, have you considered immersing yourself in a rich Jewish observant life and evaluating your own heritage from the inside? And have you in fact kept up that pledge at the end of A Year Living Biblically of still trying to rest on the Sabbath in some way?
Well, that is love. I love that question. I am not insulted at all. To answer the last part first, I have, obviously I kept up the gratitude, but there were, as you say, I shaved off my beard and I did put away the pebbles that I threw at adulterers. But there were tons of lessons and life changes that project had on me. And I do have been much more, I found the Jewish rituals much more meaningful. So we do now do Passover. We've got it coming up. We were just talking about it, actually, what we're going to do. And we sometimes try to light candles on Friday. Doesn't always work, but we try. And again, the resting, I try. It's a battle, but I do believe that it's a wonderful ritual, and when I do it, it feels amazing. It's like a detox.
Right.
So, then as for I mean, it is a fascinating idea. I'm going to have to think about that. Doing the, I do know that there was another writer after I wrote my book who did. I don't know if it was a year of living Talmudically, but as I understand it, it's not just a year. It's like 7 years of living. So I don't know if I can afford to write just the one book for 7 years. So that's going to be a problem.
Well, however we can help, we would be happy to.
Well, thank you, Rabbi.
I mean, just wondering, you have such great ideas. They're very, very exciting, each one of them. I know that, we always try to come up with ideas among the three of us. And sometimes I'll make the mistake by sharing it with my wife. And then she'll say, there's no way you're doing that. That's just not happening. So it's like, do you sit down with your family and say, listen, this is what we're going to do? And what, is there ever a point? You must have the greatest family. Like do they give you pushback, or do they say, no, go ahead, do it?
Oh, no. They get veto power, and which is a good thing, I think. I mean, there have been projects, including that one about living totally through electronic media. My plan was to sit in my room and raise my kids through Skype, and my wife put the kibosh on that. I've gotten a lot of sort of R-rated or R+ rated ideas from readers, and my wife definitely said no to those, which is good. I don't think the readers need to hear about that. That's, they don't, that's the old TMI, as they say. But yeah, and the other thing is, I reject a lot myself. I mean, I love that you asked about coming up with ideas, because one thing I try to tell my kids is I do come up with a lot of ideas. I am very prolific, but 95% of them are terrible. They are just, so it's a numbers game. And creativity, I really believe, is a numbers game, and you should be open to that. You should realize that not every idea is a gem, but you got to come up. We just got to churn them out, and there are going to be some gems in there. So I don't. I haven't followed through on every idea for many reasons, and I think the readers are better for it.
What was your favorite story from the year of living biblically? What was the funniest, or the most impactful, or the most surprising from the whole experience of the year of living biblically?
Well, there are so many. I mean, one was I guess, I'll give you one that was sort of like the funny or, weirdest, and then one that might have had a big impact. So the weirdest is the one that I have mentioned before, which is that I was in Central Park, and this was in the middle of the year, and I was really getting into it. So I was trying to dress like a biblical person. So I had the robes and the sandals. I had the huge beard. And because there is something...
Let me just interrupt for 1 second. I just want our listeners, again, for those who have not yet read the book, that again, the premise of the book was to take the Bible, the 5 books of the Bible, and to read it literally and to live it exactly literally. What's ironic is that our knowledgeable, observant community can't even picture that, because that's how different rabbinic Judaism is from your experiment. So that's what you're doing. So yeah, back to your story. I apologize.
Yeah, that was fascinating to learn the differences between what I was doing and what rabbinic Judaism says. And sometimes what I was doing was easier, and sometimes it was much harder. But yes, I was in the Central Park. I had the robe and the sandals, and a man came up to me and he said, "What's going on here? Why are you dressed like this?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to follow all the rules of the Bible, from the 10 Commandments to stoning adulterers." And he said, "I'm an adulterer. Are you going to stone me?" And I said, "Well, that would be wonderful." I was happy to have him volunteer. So I took out some stones that I had been carrying around for weeks, and he actually, they were small. Like, I didn't want to go to jail forever. They were pebble size. He grabbed them out of my hand and threw them at my face. So I thought, an eye for an eye, also in the Bible. Maybe I could. So that's how I checked that off the list. And as for the impactful, there were so many. One was this weird idea. This weird experience I had where I was really trying to really struggling with Shabbat and this idea of not working or not doing anything. And I had a sort of a weird enforced Shabbat where I went to the bathroom and the doorknob fell off and I was stuck in the bathroom alone. My wife and kid were out and I was just stuck there for like 6 hours with nothing, no reading, no phone. And I just had to sort of accept and accept the peacefulness and realize this is a gift. This could, I can see it as boring or I can see it as a gift. And I chose to see it as a gift, this gift of like, being unplugged completely, having time to think, having time to notice, like even noticing things in like the bathroom tiles that I had never really paid attention to, and just seeing how lovely the sort of the fake marble can be. So that taught me, I don't lock myself in the bathroom, but it was sort of a metaphor for Shabbat. And it's actually, I think about it a lot now because this COVID, as you know, it's horrible, and it's got so many terrible parts to it, but there are some small silver linings, and one of them is I do feel it's sort of an enforced Shabbat, a year-long Shabbat, where we have to reevaluate our lives and see what really matters.
For sure. You have a lot of fans right here. We're your fans. And you have, fans in our community and fans who are listening online. But as a public figure, as a public writer, not everybody loves everything. And I'm sure you've received criticism. And I'm wondering, you've spoken about the negative bias and how we remember the negative much more than the positive. In fact, you can maybe tell our listeners, I've heard you speak about why that is, why we needed that in order to survive prehistoric times. How do you deal with criticism? How do you deal with, whether it's in social media, online, reviews of your articles or books that are unfavorable? I'm sure there are none, but if there were any, how do you deal with the criticism?
Oh yeah, well of course, yes. I get lots of nice criticism, and I get lots. I also get slammed. And as you say, we do have a negative bias as humans. Like, you hear 100 compliments and a single insult, and what do you remember? The insult. At least that's the way my mind works. And I think most people's, because, as you mentioned, from an evolutionary standpoint, when we were, cave people, you had to be able to focus on that, the one poisonous mushroom. You had to be aware of the lion, like your life depended on it. But now it just is a recipe for a lot of anxiety and sometimes depression. So, yeah, I can't say that I'm immune to criticism, but I really do try to, focus on the positive. So the other thing is I've changed my perception a little, where I used to, when I first started writing, it was all about like, glory. Can I become famous? Can I become, someone who is acclaimed and admired? And now my goal is more, can I affect other people's lives in a positive way? Can I make the world better? And that takes a lot of pressure off, because even if a few people hate my books or don't read them, that's fine. But there are a lot of people who do like them and who have told me that it makes their lives better, and that takes a lot of pressure off of having one or two people who say you're an idiot.
So we spoke about living biblically. We spoke about gratitude. One of my favorite shticks that you pulled off, I guess, was the global family reunion. For some reason, that resonated profoundly with me. And the numbers are staggering: 3,800 in person, 6,500 around the globe. It's really impressive and creative. But I read an article a number of years ago about that, about your attempt to do that. And you wrote the following. You said it was an attempt to embrace humanity as family. That your goal throughout of it was to prove that everyone is so interconnected, is actually to bridge the divide that people feel that you look differently than another person or act differently than another person. We're really all big one family. We're interconnected. We have a very similar genealogy. What are some ways that, like in practice, we can implement that? in terms of bridging. We live in such a divided culture and a society that's more polarized than ever really in history. What are some of the tips from the book that could actually help us heal the divide? And is there a place for division? Is there a place to say we're allowed to be different? Even if we're all from the family, you're allowed to go your way and I'm allowed to go my way. We have to do some mutual respect.
Yeah, well, I love that question. And as you say, yeah, that book was all about, it started actually in a very Jewish way. I got an email from a man on a kibbutz in Israel who said, "You don't know me, but I'm your 12th cousin." And I thought, this is a scammer. He's going to ask me to wire $10,000 to a Nigerian bank. Turns out he wasn't. He was just part of this group who are trying to show that we are all related. And they've got these massive family trees that aren't even trees, they're forests. And one of the reasons I love this so much is just what you said, Rabbi Moskowitz, about how it is reframing humanity as one big family. And I will say that I've had rabbis tell me they use this in their sermons because it is a very Jewish idea. I mean, the idea of monotheism was really radical in that it said we are all family, all humans are family, as opposed to the Egyptian pharaohs who said we're gods and you people are different from us. So it was a leveling that we're all God's children. So anyway, it's hard, but I do find it helpful. Even in small, when I get annoyed, even if it's like someone cuts me off in traffic, I try to remember, you know what? We probably share like an 8th great grandparent. Our descendants are going to be relatives, if you go the other way, and, our 12th great grandchildren might get married. So I'm going to try to give this person the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're in a hurry. Maybe their kid is in the hospital. I hope she's not listening, but Judge Judy, for instance, the famous, she always drove me so crazy. I just thought she was so obnoxious and mean. And then I found out she's really not far off. She's like my 5th cousin. And I was like, you know what? It changed me. It's just like,
funny.
She's just like being Judge Judy. She's doing her shtick. She's probably a sweetheart. Let me give her the benefit of the doubt. And so, rational or not, it changed my perception. So I think it's a very powerful reframe.
Do you have maybe your books are like your children, and it's an unfair question. Is there a favorite book?
Well, I would say the one I learned most from was The Year of Living Biblically, because that was, I think someone described it as 0 to 613. I knew very little, and it was sort of. I'd say the one that made me perhaps saved me most from the gloomy and dark thoughts was the Gratitude book, which I really. This has been a tough year, and I don't know how I would have gotten through it without this gratitude. So I'm very grateful for that book.
It's getting late. We appreciate so much your time. It's really generous that you're with us. I want to ask, I don't know if the others have other questions. I want to ask one more question from me. So we are writers, not publishing books and not on the scale of the scope that you have, but we write weekly articles, and thank God we try to share it, and from within our circle it has a nice circulation. Talk to us about writing. Talk to us about the discipline of being able to publish and meet deadlines. And, you talked a little bit about creativity and where you find your inspiration, but just the experience for those who aspire to be writers in whatever capacity. Today you could have a blog, you could write a Facebook post, you're a writer, or you want to publish a book, because I would like to one day publish a book. It's on my bucket list. I have several books that are written. The problem is they're so far written only in my head. So what has to happen to take a book from A to Z, to take a book from your head and get it published and get it out there?
Right.
Give some tips to us writers.
And if I could just add on to that question, do you ever feel creative pressure? Right? Like sometimes we have a deadline, we write a weekly article, and you're sitting there on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and there's just this constant pressure to be creative. Do you ever feel that pressure, and how do you alleviate yourself of it?
All the time. I mean, I have to say, I kind of hate writing, which I know is a weird choice of professions for a writer, but funny. I love researching. I love talking to people, reading, meeting people. I love the post writing, like having written. That's wonderful. Talking to you, I love this experience, talking about it. But the actual sitting alone in a keyboard it's a very lonely, and it's not. I don't love it. So. But as you say, it's discipline. So I really do every day. I say when I'm writing a book, like now, I say from 9 to 1 o'clock, I'm going to turn off all electronics, and that's all I'm going to do. And a couple of just quick tips to motivate myself. One is it's just not seeing it as a book, but seeing it as like, I'm going to write 15 different sections, and I'm going to tie them together so that it's not overwhelming, like I am sitting down to write a book. No, I'm sitting down to write this chapter. And the other thing is that I found recently motivating is, I hope, and I hope I'm not deluded, that these books, some people, as we've discussed, find them entertaining and helpful. So it's almost like I'm doing a mitzvah, to use the Jewish lingo. Like this, I'm doing this. This is not for myself. I may not love it, but I'm doing it because it's going to have a positive effect in the world.
One of our listeners wants to know, what do you like to read? We like to read your books. What do you like to read for fun?
I do love to read. I am more of my wife is the fiction, but I'm more of a nonfiction. I just read a great book about the history of chess called The Immortal Game, by a Jewish writer whose great-great-grandfather was a chess master. And so there's a whole chapter on Jews and chess. But yeah, I loved, that's one of the things I love is sort of history nonfiction. But I do recommend David Schenck, The Immortal Game.
Well, that's good to know. Put it on your list, Rabbi Brody. That is good to know. AJ, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been generous with your time. We really thank you for answering me on Twitter. It was surprising, but really fantastic. And I want to thank you for joining us. Can you leave our listeners by telling them what they should expect to be coming out next from you?
I have a book it'll be out not for another year, but it's called The Puzzler, a quest to solve the world's hardest puzzles, from crosswords to jigsaws to the meaning of life. So that is, and there is, just to get the Jewish angle in, it's a lot about questions, which I know is big with our people. A lot of questioning.
Passover's come up, the holiday of questions.
There you go, 4. And mine has many more than 4 questions.
We will look forward to getting it and reading it and probably quoting from it in some class or sermon that we're going to give. So, AJ, wishing you an early happy Passover. Thank you. And if you'd like to immerse yourself in the full observant Jewish experience and want a rabbi to study with, we are all available and would be happy to help.
Well, thank you. I love that offer. And thanks for having me on. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night. Thank you. That was fantastic.
Maybe the book will answer Rabbi Moskowitz's magic questions. Like, how do they do those card tricks?
How do they do those card tricks? I'll tell you, it was so impressive. He was so humble, so generous with his time, coming on, answering our questions honestly, really engaged. What a special person.
Yeah, regular guy, special guy. And like I say, we have to give the disclaimer, not every article, its language is exactly, fit for the Jewish Day School, but they're entertaining, they're inspiring, they're insightful, and they will always get you thinking. So Brody will get them for you on audio. So they're really great and really worth listening to.
I don't know. Is it better to read those words if it's not being said? Maybe it's better to read it and hear them being said.
Use headphones. Use headphones.
Yeah, exactly.
Use headphones. So we had a phenomenal illusionist last week. We're going to get to the Aguna issue, a very serious topic, in a moment.
Yeah. We
had a phenomenal illusionist last week, world famous. He's been on every show, but Behind the Bima was the pinnacle of his career so far. He did a trick. He's in Cleveland. He was very far from Rabbi Moskowitz, and yet over the technology did a trick where he figured out Rabbi Moskowitz's card. So my young nephew in Israel, who likes magic, watched Behind the Bima. Shout out to my brother Judah and my sister-in-law Shayna and their family. They are big fans of Behind the Bima, and they even contributed to the global campaign in honor of Behind the Bima. So they watch Behind the Bima, and my nephew sends me a YouTube link and says, "This is how you do the trick." And I didn't know whether to watch the link, don't watch the link. I watched the link, and now it's like being told there's no tooth fairy.
That's it's so funny you said that. That's the way I felt afterwards. On the one hand, I was so relieved to know that he didn't have some magical powers that I can never figure out. On the other hand, it was disappointing. There's something nice about being awed. There's something nice about just sitting in a state of wonderment. And the second that spoiled a little bit, robs you a little bit of the innocence of it. So on the one hand, I felt very happy to know the answer to these, significant life questions. On the other hand, it was a little like knowing there wasn't a tooth fairy.
But now you can go and do it on others.
If you watch that video, though, what I will say is there is enormous skill in the sleight of hand. But it's not anything we didn't know. None of us really, we didn't really think there was something called magic. It's all,
of course not.
You got to practice. It's sleight of hand. If you get that special, I don't want to give it away, but if you got a special deck of cards and you watch the YouTube video about what to do, it would still take hours, a long practice.
Yeah.
to pull it off seamlessly and wow us the way he did. So there's still an enormous skill set involved. There's a lot of skill.
I actually read an article a few months ago about the most famous magician in the world. I forgot his name right now, but he was on a podcast I was listening to, and he described the number of hours a day that he spends practicing his trade. It's 18 hours a day from the second he wakes up to the second he goes to sleep. And, on the one hand, that's a little bit mashuga. On the other hand, you admire that. This is the trade that he is committing himself to. He wants to be the best at it. And to do that requires an enormous amount of effort and practice.
I remember when we were younger.
Was it David Mueller?
I remember when we were younger. Remember this guy, David Copperfield, and there was this one event where he was going to make, I think it was the Statue of Liberty disappear. And the whole country tuned in to see this happen. And on live TV, he made the whole Statue of Liberty disappear. I remember it was a big deal. Back then, there weren't so many channels. This was TV at night.
I think that was before I was born.
Should we spoil it for Rabbi Brody? He didn't really make it disappear. But I do want to take
He did. I saw it.
I do want to thank Rena Ben Smian again for sponsoring memory of her grandfather, and our dear friend Jeremy Gelbart for sponsoring beepermd.com. Check it out, BEEPERMD, beepermd.com. Everybody wants to know they don't have corona. Check it out. At home free PCR test, $30 rapid antigen tests. You can get them in mass and make sure to protect a whole family, a whole school, a whole organization. beepermd.com. Let's go over to very sensitive topic.
I was going to say we have some serious stuff to talk about tonight.
We do. So our community is one that has always taken very, very seriously the aguna situation. Again, an aguna is a woman who it's been determined the timing is correct. It's irreconcilable differences. It's a marriage which can't be salvaged. And it's been determined, you could say by who and by what process, by whom and by what process. But it's been determined, let's say by a Beis Din, that the get should be given. The Jewish divorce should be given. And the husband refuses to do so. He's a recalcitrant husband. The origin of get, when it comes to the Talmud, when it comes to the Gemara, was men would go off to war, and if they didn't return home and you were unsure whether they were still alive, the woman was chained. She was unable to go on with her life and remarry, because a woman cannot be married to multiple men, and therefore she was not able to continue with her life. And in those times, it wasn't ever imagined that someone would electively, that somebody would choose to torture a woman by putting her in that situation. But tragically, in our time, that's exactly what's happened. I remember during 9/11, and there's a whole book by the Beis Din of America about this, we have still lived through circumstances of questions of, in fact, I just saw a sefer promoted and advertised during Corona, that there are people who died and they weren't identified because they didn't get a proper burial preparation, early times of Corona, and maybe their wives should be aguna, whatever the case may be. So there are recalcitrant husbands today, which is another way of saying real low-life people who refuse to give their wife a get and to set them free. Now, just because a woman wants to be divorced doesn't make her an aguna from the moment that she says to her husband, we have irreconcilable differences. Very, very important to state and to clarify that a husband is not always the villain, the husband is not always the devil, that a husband is not always evil, and that just because a woman wants to be divorced, that doesn't mean at that moment she is entitled to be declared or be advocated for as an aguna. It is reasonable for a husband to say, I'll give the get when the civil divorce, let the two divorces happen simultaneously. It's not obligated. It's more righteous, more noble no reason the husband should give the get right away and take it off the table. But if he wanted to time it with the giving of the civil, it is reasonable, it is legitimate. And a woman is not an aguna just because she or others declare her to be. It's a body like a beis din who examines and hears the situation and makes that determination. And that's when the community should and needs to respond. And our community has never hesitated. We have had several rallies and we have fought tirelessly and advocated on behalf of several women in that position. And unfortunately, we held dozens of rallies, and only when he passed away last year, Shem Risham Yirkov, only when he passed away last year, Dr. Abisror, was his wife free. Despite countless meetings, negotiations, rallies.
Erev Yom Kippur, Rabbi Goldberg, Erev Yom Kippur, you and I spent hours in his office. That was the most powerful experience I've ever had. But
he chose to never meet a grandson rather than free a woman who he was married to for a short time and with whom he had no children. But he's no longer here. It took actually his death, which is one of the two ways that the rabbi said that a woman goes free. But in all the other cases, we've rallied, and it's not only our rallies. We recently, last year, rallied. We rented school buses and brought the children of school to the rally. And our rally definitely brought it to a head. But there was an individual in the community who also met privately with the recalcitrant husband, and he primarily, but a combination, deserves the credit. That afternoon, he gave the get. That afternoon.
Right.
One rally.
Rabbi Broide and I were there.
Involvement.
It's featured on HBO, I believe, right? Big
It was
documentary.
featured on some documentary. Yeah, it was featured on some documentary. And I want to give the credit, not to the rally. I want to give the credit to that individual who stepped up with leadership and got it done. I share that only to say that our community doesn't brush it under the carpet. We don't ignore it. We don't neglect it. And if a woman indeed is an aguna and has been designated as such from an appropriate and proper source, we do not hesitate to step up and to get involved and to do absolutely everything in our power. And I'll give you one such example right now that we should all get involved. Naftali Eyal Sharabani, who he and his wife have been separated since 2010, so 10 years. He's been refusing to give her a get for 10 years. So how do we know she's an aguna? Maybe there's another side to the story. Who says he's such a villain? The answer is the Beis Din Tzedek of Kol Even HaEzer in Lakewood, New Jersey, issued a seruv. They issued a document saying that he is a recalcitrant husband, she is an aguna, and everyone should apply whatever social pressure they can. And there's been a groundswell all over social media and elsewhere, putting tremendous pressure appropriately on Naftali Sharabani, who for 10 years torture. Imagine a woman wants to remarry. She wants to date. She wants companionship.
Move on
she
with
wants
her
to move on
life.
with her life.
Right.
She's entitled to. And this woman is unable to, and to the degree that anybody can, if anybody knows him, Eyal Sharabani, put that pressure, share that post, get that word out. And it's tragic. It's sad. We don't want to air our dirty laundry. And there are people who push back and say, why are you airing dirty laundry? Why would you want to publicize or promote that there are such men? But the answer is, we're not airing dirty laundry. We're actually promoting how the Jewish community is a family, and we step up for one another. And as terrible as this is, we won't rest until the people who deserve their get receive their get. So why did this come up tonight? It came up tonight because in the case of Mr. Naftali Eyal Sharabani, again, if you know him, if you can apply pressure, social pressure, if you can encourage, whatever you can do to help his wife, who for 10 years has been trying to move on with her life. But it also came up because there is a case in our own backyard. And there's a local case of a woman who has a civil divorce, despite what her ex-husband is in some cases saying, has a complete and finalized civil divorce, and who her best faith effort has tried through several means, several rabbanim, several batei din, with marriage counseling, with an attempt at mediation, and all of it has fallen flat. And the Beis Din of America, one of the most reputable batei din outside of Israel, Beis Din of America, who I think issues the most gittin outside of Israel, issued a seruv against him and said that she is an aguna. And ORA, the Organization for the Resolution of Agunos, which is a partner of ours and we support and is really a leader in this area, and we long for the day that they can shut their doors and close down because they're not needed. But they have also put him on the wall of recalcitrant husbands. I will tell you, if there's any levity in this, that the website apparently that lists is called Recalcitrant Parties. And when someone sent me the link and I saw that's what it was called, my first reaction was, how wicked, how incredulous are these people? They throw parties? These recalcitrant husbands have parties together? And I was like, these recalcitrant parties? What is the matter with these people? Like, is this Stone V'Amora? They have recalcitrant parties? Anyway, foolish me, they are the recalcitrant parties. So this individual is among them. So some people became aware of this case and they started to promote him as well. And then others have reached out and said, hey, rabbis, where are you? Rabbis, don't you care about a woman in your community? So I want to just share, and I know I've been speaking for a little bit. I appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts, clarifications, or questions or insights. But I want to share something that's really, really important for our listeners to understand. The goal, every single time, the goal in the case of an aguna, and again, sometimes the men are in the right and the women are wrong in issues of gittin and custody and divorce. Very important to also state. Not always is the woman the victim and the man the perpetrator. Not always is he the recalcitrant party and the woman is the angel. There are both directions, and it's really important to understand the nuance and to trust the people who are competent involved. Very important to say that. So we have to remember what the goal is. The goal is when there's a woman in aguna who wants to get and wants to move on. The goal is to get her get. That's the goal. The goal is not to be right. The goal is not to be popular. The goal is not to look like a hero. The goal is not to satisfy some social justice need within ourselves. The goal is to get her a get. And I will add, the goal is not only for her to receive her get, the goal is for her to do it without any unintended casualties and consequences like her children. These online campaigns about men that have a permanent imprint and footprint in the digital world are painful for children who one day will Google their father. And if a person can achieve that result without taking that route, it is much, much, much more desired. If there can be conversations, negotiations, efforts, it is much, much more desired, even after she's in aguna. So a woman's in aguna, and Ora's taken it up, and they're on the wall of shame. But before there is unleashed a very public campaign locally in the community and far beyond, every effort should be expended because we want to protect the children. You want to protect the woman who doesn't want to be spoken about at Shabbos tables everywhere. That's the nuclear option. It's a last resort. And when I say it's the last resort, it's also the last resort to put pressure on that recalcitrant husband. And when you unload all of your options and you have no point of leverage or incentivizing left, then you have nothing left in order to do it. So for the sake of the woman, that's what has to happen. There's somebody who I admire tremendously, a member of our community with a big, big heart and an enormous moral compass, who is so disturbed by the notion of an aguna and wonders, an excellent question that maybe some of our listeners have as well. Rabbis have come up with the sale of chametz and the heter iska and the Shabbos elevator and lots of legal loopholes. Why haven't we found a way out and a solution for this? He's so terribly bothered. So when he saw that there's such a woman here, he sent me an email and he resigned his membership from the shul. He said, I can't belong to a shul that has rabbis who do nothing. So of course, when I explained, we speak to this wife in this particular case several times a day. I have testified in court. We have gone, it's not me, the rabbis of our community, our colleagues in Boca Raton, the other rabbis here, Rabbi Gibber, Rabbi Rabovsky, the rabbis have been involved as much, far more than I, every day, several times a day. Of course, when he understood, he obviously walked it back. But the goal is not to unleash the campaign. And I'll end by saying this. When the time is right, because we're still working several avenues, when the time is right, and when the wife, the aguna in this case, says yes, it's time, unfortunately, tragically, sadly, there are no alternatives. It's trying to go public and put it in the shul bulletins and hang it all over town and put it in the social media and hang it all over where he's from in New Jersey and where his parents and siblings live and put it everywhere. When that time comes, I'll tell you right now, I promise you, as we have before, we will put everything we have into that campaign. The entire world will know that recalcitrant husband's name. They will know his name, they will know his face, and sadly, unfortunately, they will know his family's faces and names, because they are, if they don't encourage and help him to give that get, sadly, then they're part of the problem, not the solution. So that's a promise and a pledge, but it has to be the right timing. The goal here is not to feel right. The goal here is not to shout the loudest. The goal here is not to be the hero. The goal is to get her a get. And if we can do it without ever doing that, then that's the goal. And she doesn't want it. You have to follow the agun of the woman who's consulting several experts, several abanim, several other avenues. And when the time is right, we're going to do it. All right. Thank you for giving me that time.
I have a lot to comment in return, but I do want to share a text that I received, and I want to let you respond to that text because I think it's a very important point. And perhaps other people in our community are thinking about it as well. So texted me and said, just to be clear, I haven't spoken to him in ages, and I might get slack for saying this, ... but there are always two sides to the coin. right? How would you respond to that, Rabbi? People who know him, people who may have heard a narrative, and I'm sure this happens in so many Aguna cases where friends who are in the middle of it, they hear two sides of the story, they know that it's probably more gray than black and white. How do you as a rabbi convince people that this is unequivocally something that is an abuse, something that needs to end, and that even if there might be a little bit of gray there, then you have to err on the side of justice when rabbis and experts are telling you to?
I'm so happy that you raised that, because it's really important. There's not two sides to the story. There's 3 or 4 sides to every story. We do marriage counseling and we do mediation and business and we do, and you know, there's his side, there's her side, and then there's the truth. There's definitely multiple sides. But what I think it's important to understand here is that there can be multiple sides to a story in some of the elements of the story, but when there's a fundamental part of the story where there's only one side, we need to focus on that. So am I going to tell you I'm not talking about this particular situation, in any situation, that one side is entirely innocent and did everything right the entire way and bears no guilt? Absolutely not. But I will say is that if you divide and conquer, if you look and recognize and say, just on the Aguna issue, let's say this woman did other things that are wrong. Let's say her parents did things that are wrong or hurtful. Let's say there were mistakes made. But right now, given where we are right now, without the ability to turn back the clock, right? You say to someone, so therefore what? She should live without her get the rest of her life? She should be an Aguna forever and suffer? What justification is there? Sometimes maybe there are justifications, but what justification is there ever to use a get as leverage to extort or exploit using the get? And so you have to narrow in and focus. In this particular case, I can tell you that he has told his friends outright and blatant lies. Now, I promise you that if we get to the point that we need to publicize this, she will be on Behind the Bima. I've already spoken to her. If we get to that point, she will tell her story on Behind the Bima. The whole world will know his name. We will do everything we can. So just like tonight, we are trying to free Chava, and we don't hesitate to mention the name Natalia Eyal Sharbani and to call on anyone who knows him to publicize and to pressure, socially pressure. We'll do the same in this case. We're not there yet. So yes, are there multiple sides to a story? There are multiple sides to components of a story. Like, I don't know, A murders B. So would you say, well, there's 2 sides to the story? Because it turns out that B really made fun of A's mother and really stole money from him and really made him feel bad and insulted him. Yeah, there's multiple sides to the story. There's a lot of background to the story. But if we just focus in on the act of the murder that was so unjustified, that's indefensible, there's only one side to that part of the story. And the same is true with this get. Again, I can't disclose too much, but in this case, you know, he's sharing absolute lies and the evidence is piled up. And the way I know that is not only because I know that firsthand, but a Beis Din examines that. A Beis Din doesn't issue a seruv. A Beis Din doesn't come to this conclusion without examining and without looking through it. So again, the woman's not always right and the man's not always the perpetrator. There are, one of my friends is texting me right now, there's such a thing as a male aguna. There's a woman who won't accept a get. And yes, there are men having out of a heter me'er rabbanim and other things that can be done. There are men who are tortured by women who do not cooperate or who in custody and in court torture them. The man's not always the perpetrator. The woman's not always the victim. There are cases that can go both ways. But when a Beis Din has made that, when a reputable Beis Din, that's also important, when a reputable, competent Beis Din has made that determination, that element, there's only one side to the story on that element.
And you know, the only other, thank you, first of all, for addressing that. And the only other thing I'll add, I mean, I have a lot to add, but I want to give Rabbi Broide a chance, is I don't think people fully appreciate just how much time, energy, and resources our Rebbeim have used throughout the years in order to solve countless issues. So whether it's with 9/11 that you addressed, and I was in Rabbi Willig's shir in YU during 9/11. I remember he used to come into shir every day and tell us stories about what was going on in the Beis Din and the types of questions that he, as a member of the Beis Din, was dealing with and grappling with, the enormous complexity of them, the halachic questions, the sensitivity of it, how many hours of literally blood, sweat, and tears Rabbi Willig spent on that. Well, there was a Ravadia Yosef, who in Israel was really at the forefront of freeing so many agunas, and a lot of his Piskei Halacha enabled many women to go free, to our Rabbi, Rosh Shechter. I remember when Ora started, I was in YU at the time. It was actually my neighbor, the guy in the next room next to me, Josh Ross, and now Rabbi Moshe Davis. In fact, my mom bought the first tzedakah boxes for Ora at the time. We needed $75. None of us had a penny. So she fronted the money for the first Ora tzedakah boxes. But I remember Josh Ross every single day in YU would go up to Rav Shechter, and Rav Shechter was guiding him how to do it halachically, how to do it appropriately, how to do it in a way that was in line with our tradition. And they're enormously invested in this. And so sometimes people see it and say, why aren't the rabbis doing more? I want to flip that a little bit and say, I don't think people appreciate just how much our Rabbeim, right? Me, you, our Rabbeim, our community's Rabbeim, go out on a limb and spend so much time and effort to resolve as many of these cases as possible.
There's a story of Rav Ovadia Yosef Zatzal. There's an amazing story. When Rav Ovadia was older, he had a heart problem, and he went to the hospital and he was examined and he was told he needed surgery. He needed surgery that day. The surgery, his life was so in the balance, he needed surgery immediately. He insisted his son bring him home, and he went home before the surgery against the doctor's advice. And when his son said to him, like, Abba, they say that you need the surgery,
What's
you
so
could die,
important,
you need it
right?
immediately. He said, there's a case of an aguna I'm writing a tshuva on. And this surgery is dangerous. It's potentially lethal. And if I don't survive the surgery, there's no one else alive who's going to write the tshuva that's going to free this woman, this aguna. I need to go home with all the risk upon himself. I need to go home and write this responsa, write this tshuva in order to release this aguna before he underwent the surgery. So these rabbis are heroes. They have much bigger and broader shoulders than we do. What do we have, a megaphone and we stand on a street corner? That's
pretty
easy.
big megaphone.
It's a big megaphone, but that's easy. They are the ones who really take this on. But we can't talk about the subject without also talking about the fact that there is a solution. There is a solution. And again, it took the creativity. Rav Zalman Nechemya Goldberg and Zatzal and Yibad L'chaim Tovim Aruchim, Rav Asher Weiss and Rabbi Willig and many, and Rav Ovadia Yosef and others who came up with the halachic prenuptial agreement. And if every couple that gets married signs a halachic prenup, the Beis Din of America told me, not me, they've declared publicly, but my friend is the Menahel of the Beis Din of America. Every single time a halachic prenup has been signed, a get was given. Every single time. Because according to halacha, a man is obligated to provide what's called mizonos for his wife. A man is obligated to pay for her living expenses. We waive that today because we have joint accounts and we live together. So if a Beis Din paskins that a couple should be divorced, and the husband says, I refuse, I want to remain married. What the halachic prenup does is it says, oh, you want to remain married? In this case, it's time for you to start providing mizonos for your wife, $150 a day. And the $150 a day start to pile up quickly. So when a husband is signed, it's binding, and it's a civil document, binding in secular court, and a husband, it's held up in court, in fact, and when a husband signs a halachic prenup, if a Beis Din paskins that they need to get divorced and he refuses, essentially saying he wants to remain married, he will be bound by $150 a day that will add up quickly. And every single case where a man signed that, the get was given. I was involved in a case where right before the wedding, the husband did not want to sign the prenup. He refused.
I remember that.
And I was not the Masada Kedushin. The Masada Kedushin and I were up till the wee hours of the morning, the night before the wedding, pleading, cajoling, begging, urging him to sign, and telling him that I, at least in my case, wasn't going to attend or participate if he didn't sign. And it was in the last minute he signed. And the couple got divorced. And he was not so prepared to give the get. And when the prenup was invoked, and he was told he had till 5 p.m. to give the get, or else he would start to have to pay that money, at 4:59 he gave the get that day. And if there were not a prenup, I don't know that she would have a get. So there is a solution. And rabbis should refuse to officiate unless the prenup is used.
And I just want to be clear, none of us, just to state the obvious, none of us would officiate a wedding if there was no halachic prenup signed in advance. And I do think it's also important because I see this question popping up a lot. There is called a post-nup. We were a few years back wanted to run a post-nup party where we invited everyone in the community who did not sign a prenup before they were married to come, get dressed up in their wedding gowns and their wedding clothes, and to come to shul, and we would have a post-nup party where we encourage people to take that on to protect those marriages.
So we missed an opportunity. But it's not too late. We should bring the Bluefields back on to sign a post-nup.
That would be great.
80 years married 80 years, 100 years
Never
old.
Too late.
Not too late to sign a post-nup. Never too late.
Now, where could
to
people find a post-nup, Rabbi, if they're interested?
Theprenup.org is the website to do a halachic prenup before you're married or after you're married. And I will say this, people had the impression that this is a YU thing, a modern thing. First of all, Rav Ovadia Yosef and Rav Asher Weiss and Rav Zalman Nechemya Goldberg are very far from modern, and they back the prenup. But today has grown. Mishpacha Magazine, last year or 2 years ago, had a major piece about how the prenup has caught on in the more yeshivish world as well. And why is that, by the way? Because the moment that you've had to deal with an aguna, the moment you've had to look into the eyes of a woman and say, yes, you're chained, you have no hope, no future, no companionship, and we have no way out, is when you never want to have to do that again. So you begin to require or endorse the use of the halachic prenup. So there are different versions of it. Diane First in Chicago has a version of the halachic prenup. It has been said that the Tshuvas V'Hanhagos for Sternbach in Eretz Yisrael doesn't hold of the prenup. What he doesn't hold of is the $150 a day. Because in Israel, Mazonos, the daily cost is less. It's not that he's against the institution of it. So there are people who have claims, and maybe there are people who are upset about the money component, but you can have a halachic prenup that just names a beis din, that doesn't even involve the money component for those who object to it. There are people who object and say the couple's not even married. You're bringing up a halachic prenup? I love this one, because I say to them, I guess we're not going to have a ksuba at your wedding. They're like, what do you mean? A ksuba is like an artistic document, the wall. It's the best part of the wedding. You give it as an honor to read. I said, do you know what the ksuba says? The ksuba is about if you die or get divorced, your estate needs to provide for your wife. It's so unromantic, I guess we shouldn't do the ksuba either. If you're willing to have a ksuba, you could sign a prenup, and I never signed the prenup at the wedding. Some people try to make a whole ceremony and kibudim and the chasen's tish. Again, to me, it's not about, the cause. It's about the result. I always ask them to do it in advance. It doesn't need a spotlight to the degree that it's not going to get more people to do it. And so there is a solution. It's called the prenup.
It's interesting. Sorry.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
No, please.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned that there was a member that said that, he wanted to resign his membership because he's so disappointed in the way that the rabbis in general have dealt with the Aguna crisis. Do you ever meet women, call it religious women, that really want that get, but then there's a point after waiting a year or two, maybe even longer, where they just say, you know what, the heck with this whole thing. I'm done with this religious life. I just got to move on. Or do people kind of stick with it and they just live a chained life?
But here's the problem: is that if they want to move on, they have to find a man who's willing to move on and live with.
Well, I'm saying not a religious man.
Lives with a married woman.
They just give up on the whole.
But even the non-religious man, it's tragic, and even the non-religious man might need to find a rabbi who's going to officiate, and the rabbi might say, "Are you divorced? And was a get given?" We have Reform and conservative colleagues, Reform and conservative colleagues in town. We're very close with them. We have wonderful relationships, who have asked us about getting for their community. Some people assume that Reform or conservative don't believe in a get, but they do, and they have, and we have a wonderful Masada getting in our community, Rabbi Flug, who's competent and kind and sensitive and professional and timely. And so, a person who wants to ignore it has to be willing to get married with no rabbi sometimes. But it's a tragedy. Imagine you lose that person to religion. It is an absolute tragedy. But when people tell me that why can't the rabbis do something? The answer is we can. If rabbis would refuse to officiate, and if everybody who got married had a halachic prenup, we would eliminate the case of agunas. And there's something we can do if we apply social pressure and all get involved and don't excuse and don't say, there's another side to the story. If we hold our friends accountable and we require this, then there is something we can all do. So we don't have to throw up our arms. We don't have to be angry. Sometimes God says, I want you to be my partner. I'm inviting you to step up and show leadership. And so you're right. You're frustrated, but there are things that we can do. We're not helpless. And there are other situations. There are tragic situations parallel to Aguna, because people think that this is the only one. So it is absolutely tragic. It's absolutely tragic. We shouldn't stand for it. We have to step up and do something about it. And we ask everybody to help. Naftali Ayash Arabani, to free his wife, 10 years. 10 years, free Chava. 10 years is a very long time. 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, 1 day, 1 moment is a long time. But 10 years is forever. And
where does he live?
Acceptable. He lived in LA, but apparently he's kind of on the run from this social pressure that's become. He's probably in Florida with everybody else now, trying to blend in. So if you see him in Florida, let the world know. So, I hate to end with this downer, but it's important. It's critically important. And we haven't done a shame on you in a long time. But any ma'again, any recalcitrant husband, and anyone who's an accomplice to them, shame on you. And that's our promise and our pledge. But we also wanted to offer that clarification. And the clarification is that in the case that's happening with us, we're following the will of the woman. You can't care more about the woman than she cares about herself. And you can't sacrifice her children on the altar of, I stand up for social justice. You have to follow her lead and what she wants for her children, her own name, pursuing the different avenues, the pace that we're supposed to be going, and so on and so forth. That's really important.
It's funny. We talk about that a lot with leadership. Is oftentimes, people want to go faster, and you have to slow people down, right? I remember, sometimes you'll hear about an illness, someone will get very sick in the community, and there's this mad rush to do and to chesed it. And sometimes as a rabbi, where your initial inclination, the reason why you got into the rabbin is to help people, sometimes we have the unfortunate job of actually telling the community, slow down, right?
Right.
Let it play out a little bit. We have to organize. We have to see what the family wants. Sometimes you need to slow down people's passion as a rabbi, which is counterintuitive and it happens behind the scenes, and you oftentimes get flack for it, but that's what leadership means sometimes.
It is a great point, because you're right. The rabbin is the balance between sometimes people are indifferent and apathetic and complacent. You're like, where are you? Sometimes you have to light a fire, and sometimes you have to lower the flame, because it happens to be a big lesson in life. My father has always taught me and constantly reinforces this idea in business, in Jewish communal life, in every aspect of life, that go into every meeting and every conversation and say, what do I want the result to be, and what's the best way to get there? You could be right or you could be effective. It's true in politics. We're living in such divided times, and people are more interested in being right than they're being persuasive. So do you want the result or do you want to be right? And that's really important in this case also. So when the best thing for the result is to have a public campaign, believe you me, the world will know it and they will hear us. But when we're not yet there, and that the wife herself has determined we're not yet there, then don't try to be more right than the wife, because the result is going to impact her life for the rest of her life. Don't sacrifice her children or her life, and don't set it back. Sometimes if you're too public or in the wrong place, the wrong time, you're going to set back the whole cause. And the goal is the result. The goal is for her to be free. So that is what it's all about. Thank our audience for staying with us a little bit longer, because we promised and pledged to get back to the hour. A.J. Jacobs, if you've not yet read his books or articles, check them out, look them up, and you will enjoy. You will be entertained, informed, inspired. They really are fantastic. I want to thank our sponsors again, Rena Ben Smi, in memory of her grandfather, Mort Kaufman, and beepermd.com, beepermd.com, free at home. Who doesn't want free at home testing? Who hasn't had a nightmare of corona of trying to figure out how you can get tested? So free at home testing, beepermd.com, beepermd.com.
Is that a beeper? Like, I'm just wondering, what is beeper?
Beeper.
Making fun of our sponsors here.
Yeah, well, listen, I love Jeremy.
That's a way to drive away sponsors.
What is that? That's an easy one to remember.
Give us money, sponsor an episode, and we'll make fun of your product.
I'm saying, you go to the website and it dials a beeper, like they call you back?
This is one of those episodes we should have quit while we were ahead. Anyway, on that note, thank you all, and let's all step up and stand up for justice and do what we need when we're asked to do, and make sure that nobody suffers under our watch. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay holy.